Welcome back to another video. Today we have my top 10 favorite manga series of all time. But first, before I get into this video, I just wanted to let you know that I'm not that big of a manga reader. I prefer just to watch anime, even though I know that the majority of the time the manga version is a better telling. I just prefer the look and everything of anime, and I wish it wasn't that way. I wish all the anime would be as good and complete as their manga counterparts, but unfortunately we can't have our cake and eat it too. I also don't read and watch any of these long, ongoing, weekly, ain't nobody got time for that. And B, this list will all contain manga series that I have personally finished, except for number 10, because there is a bit of a disclaimer with that. May as well start with number 10, that is Berserk. I haven't gotten that far into Berserk. It's not a finished series, but it is awesome. It's one of my favorite anime series of all time as well, and the manga does a lot better job of telling the same parts that I know from the anime series. So even though I'm not caught up with Berserk, even though I haven't even read everything of what I own of Berserk yet, Berserk is number 10, and it is number 10 for the reason just that I haven't read that much of it to even say that it's much higher on the list, even though I am really enjoying it from what I've read so far. Moving on to number 9, speaking of another anime which can't hold a flame to its manga counterpart, here we have Ronin Kenshin, and this used to be one of my favorite anime of all time, but ever since reading the manga, I really can't mess with it anymore. The anime, it really wasted a lot of time with the last season where it was complete non-canon filler, and then the way that they handled the first season where they let it drag on a bit. The manga just handled everything better, of course, because that is the original, but you miss out on the majority of all of the characters' development if you're just going to watch the anime. So I really can't stress this enough. If you're a fan of Ronin Kenshin, if you're looking to get into Ronin Kenshin, then, which I highly recommend that you do, read the manga instead, and also watch the Trust Material anime, which is still one of my favorite anime movies / OVAs. Beautiful stuff right there. Moving on to number 8, this was a bit of a hard decision for me because I had two manga series that I enjoyed equally, that I thought were equally good, but for completely different reasons. On one hand, we have Genshiken, and then on the other hand, we have Tobits. So with Genshiken, this manga series is about a group of anime and manga fans together in this college club, and they just discuss their love for anime and manga. That's really all it is. They explore their love for it, and I really enjoyed seeing these characters because they really put a lot of detail into their personality and the way that they interact with each other. It's mostly related to that, and then the way that the series goes on. I'm not talking about the second season or anything, but just everything with Genshiken in general, the way that some of them can graduate and new characters come in and old characters remain relevant. It's really a lot of fun to read that, and there's a lot of touching moments there. But then again, on the other hand, with Tobits, this is a series which is a lot shorter, but is something that I love just as equal to Genshiken here. Tobits is about this boy who finds this android. She's basically like an android. It's a Persicom, which is basically like a computer that's in the shape of a human. And the series itself really raises a lot of questions whether humans and robots, or humans and machines, can actually love each other, if a machine can actually experience love. With Tobits, honestly, the way that I feel about this story is that I didn't care so much for the dynamic between the protagonist and his Persicom as much as I did for some of the other characters that we see, because there's a lot of side stories here and side characters where we see their backstories and how they fall in love with their Persicoms and what happened between them, and I really felt a lot more for those situations than I did for the protagonist. Even though his story is a good one, I just like the other character stories a bit more. And since I also saw both of the anime of Genshiken and Tobits, honestly, I would have to recommend that you just go ahead and read both of them, because the ending of Genshiken is much better than the anime. I felt that the ending was much better in the manga. I really can't say why, but just go ahead and read the manga. If you're looking to get into Genshiken as well as Tobits, I would also recommend that you read the manga instead of watching the anime. The anime is not really that bad, but there are some non-canon episodes, and they also don't give you as much detail with the ending as they do with the ending in the manga, even though they're technically the same. Moving on to number 7, we have a manga series that regretfully I will never be able to finish, and this used to be my favorite manga of all time. That was Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei. Unfortunately, due to it just not being translated anymore, because I was collecting all of the volumes of it, I just have to admit and just face the music that I will never have a complete experience of this manga. But it doesn't really matter. I still recommend that you go ahead and check this one out because it's very episodic. It's basically about this demented teacher who is completely pessimistic and sometimes suicidal. He has this classroom full of misfit children who all have their own personal issues, and it's not really dark or anything like it sounds. It's actually very funny because it takes a look into all of these characters' lives. Like, say for example, there's one girl in the class who has OCD. She comes over to the teacher's house to start cleaning, and she starts organizing it to the point where she starts playing Tetris with his house and maximizing space to the point where she goes outside of his house to bring more stuff in just because of her organizational skills, to the point where the walls fall off of his house and it's this perfectly stacked cube of just junk and other stuff that was in his house. It's really fun seeing that sort of thing, and it's very episodic, with each chapter focusing on a different character in his classroom. Sometimes they focus back on the same characters, and I really love the character interaction here and the way that they take a look at all of these issues. One other thing that I really loved about this manga series was that it taught you a lot about Japanese pop culture, and there's a lot of other cultural references here as well that you have to look up to understand some of the times, or go to the back of the manga and then see some of the references that they're making as they explain it, because sometimes you'll look at a panel and then the teacher is just going on one of his tantrums about how everything's just going to shit basically, and he's got this long list of like 30 different things up there, which is probably explaining why nobody ever completely translated the series, because there's so much text here, but it's just all of these different references. It references a lot of manga and anime as well as Japanese pop culture, so it is really enjoyable. Moving on to number 6, here we see another manga series which had a huge disservice from its anime adaptation. That is Akira. 6 volumes that are this thick. Look at all this content right here, and that was squeezed down into like a 2-hour-long movie. You just can't do that. And of course, the movie was made before the manga ever finished, but I don't see an excuse in that because that's not the viewer's fault. Many people out there regard Akira as being one of the greatest anime movie of all time, and so did I until I read the manga. And like most people, the majority of people who would really hold that movie in high regards, as far as the story goes, probably have never read the manga. But with Akira, everybody out there should just check it out, especially if you really enjoy the movie. Of course, the movie still stands on its own in terms of its animation quality, but the story really, there's a lot of open ends because nothing is explained. You just have to read the manga to understand. And the manga is completely different. Like, you open up volume 1, and you're like, wow, that's different. It's not like you get halfway through and then start the differences. It's different from the beginning. Moving on to number 5, we have a 3-volume long manga, which is probably going to be the darkest and most depressing manga you've ever read. That is No Longer Human. This has an anime adaptation as well as a live-action movie adaptation. I haven't seen the movie, but it is just a movie. It's probably not going to hold a candle to it. And then we also have the anime series, which I've seen half of it, and honestly, if you're going to watch the anime, at least have already read the manga first, because it's not quite the same thing. It doesn't have the same feel to it. It's not as dark and gritty as the manga is, but it's basically about this guy who has everything in life. He can get women, because he's, you know, a decent-looking guy. He is basically the class clown, so he makes everybody laugh, and he's liked by a lot of people as well, as he's born into a lot of money, but to him that doesn't really mean anything because he doesn't really understand his place in life, and he doesn't understand people at all. He looks at them almost as if they're basically aliens because he doesn't really understand their emotions whatsoever. So basically the story is about him coping with this, and it is not a sweet ride, let me tell you that. It is very depressing. Moving on to number 4, I may as well just name this video Top 10 Anime That Didn't Do As Good of a Job as Their Manga Did, because that is Shigarui Death Frenzy. Where do I begin with this? The anime was only 12 episodes. Madhouse cut corners whenever they could because it was super low budget, and the story is only halfway through the manga. Honestly, I would recommend, if you're into Shigarui or if you're looking for a very mature samurai series, then just read the manga. Unfortunately, it's not licensed yet, but whenever it got licensed or whenever it gets licensed, I would buy it all instantly. I know it's in, you can get it in French, Spanish, and Italian, but you just can't get it in English here, unfortunately. But it's a really great story. There are times where it deviates from its path and gets into, like, some weird stuff here, but it's basically about the strong rivalry, one of my favorite rivalries in anime or manga, between two characters. One of them grew up with nothing and wants to become a high-ranked samurai, and the other one was basically born with a silver spoon in his mouth as a samurai with pretty decent rank here, and it's basically about their rivalry with each other. It is very bloody, very gory. You have organs that are coming out. There's one part in the story where somebody eats another person's eyeball. It's pretty gross. Moving on to number 3, we have Welcome to the N.H.K, which probably comes as a surprise to many people because everybody knows it's one of my favorite anime and manga, and I've even read the novel as well. But N.H.K, if you don't know yet, it's basically the story of this person. He's a hikikomori, which is basically a recluse. He stays inside. He has social anxiety issues, so he just stays inside by himself for years, and this is his adventure of meeting different characters such as his neighbor Yamazaki, who is a total otaku, as well as Misaki. Now, the manga, this isn't one of these situations where I can say that you should read the manga instead of watching the anime, because the N.H.K, it has the novel, manga, and anime that all 3 of them serve a different purpose and basically tell a different story, so you really can't stick with only one with this. I would personally recommend to watch all 3, but the manga is very dark and very wacky. There's the drama here really goes over the top in numerous situations. I really can't explain how because spoilers, but it is definitely a great series that you should check out. Moving on to number 2, we have a 3-volume long horror series by Junji Ito that is Buzu Maki, which is basically about this town which has become infested or haunted by this spiral, and everything is relating to a spiral, basically. Like, one of my favorite panels out of the entire manga, which you can actually see in the opening of all my videos, where I took it and I enhanced it and I split it up between those different panels on the wall of that 3D room that I made, is actually from Uzumaki. If you haven't read the series, is basically where this guy's dad becomes obsessed with the spiral, and he takes himself in this round barrel and twists himself up into a spiral. There's other times where like this one girl, her head starts becoming this spiral and her eyeballs popping out. I'm sure everyone's seen that. Or the snails bit. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that as well. It's definitely something that you need to check it out if you are a big fan of horror, because there's really nothing like it. Junji Ito is a mastermind. Now lastly, at number 1, we have another series which unfortunately is not available to buy in English. I would love to own all of it, as it is my favorite obviously, but it's available in like Spanish, Italian, and French, not English, but that is Homunculus. I have a review of it on my channel if you're curious. It's a really great story about this guy who has this ability to cover one eye and see the representation of people's personalities. Like, you can have a girl that's made out of sand and can change her shape, and it's supposed to represent something about her personality. Somebody else is like this glass enclosure filled with water with fish in them, and you could just look at people and think, what does this say about their personality? Sometimes he goes more in depth and describes why he feels that way or why he's seeing these things about their personality and what it means. But he basically has that ability because he underwent this experimental procedure where he had a chunk of his skull removed. He had a big hole drilled in his skull, and it allowed him to basically have a third eye and see these things about people. There's more to it than that, but I don't want to spoil it for you because you should definitely check it out. Number 1 is Homunculus. Let me know in the comment section below what is your favorite manga of all time, or what is your top 10 favorite. Thanks for watching, and of course, this list didn't include things such as Vagabond, Gundam Origins, Lone Wolf and Cub, Vinland Saga. Stories like this I really haven't gotten far enough to even talk about in a top 10 favorite video. It would be kind of weird just because I'm still like really at the beginning of those. But anyways, let me know your favorites in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.